Perhaps you already know this feeling. A day passes through too much noise, too many thoughts, too many things that must be understood and remembered. The modern mind is rarely given true rest. Even when night falls, the questions keep circling about meaning, about direction, about whether one is living rightly. And in that fatigue, we often lift our eyes to the sky as if the universe might speak on our behalf. But tonight, you do not need to look for answers. You do not need to try to understand anything more. This video is a very slow invitation to step out of the noise of thinking and into a quieter orbit. There, the universe is not presented as a distant, frightening place, but as a vast mirror reflecting the most private questions within you. What is discovered when humanity looks too deeply into space sometimes shocks us not because of its immensity, but because it touches something fragile inside us. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." On this journey, the voice will slow, the sentences will grow sparse. And if your eyelids begin to feel heavy, that is not because you are missing something, it is because you are arriving exactly where you need to be. Perhaps you have lived through many days like this, days when the mind never truly rests, even though the body is already tired. Days when one thought follows another, as if there were a voice inside continually reminding you that you still need to understand more, explain more, grasp something more in order to feel safe. And then when night arrives, when the light softens and the outside world slows down at the very moment meant for rest, the mind becomes louder than ever. We live in an age where alertness is treated as a duty, always updating, always reacting, always needing to know where you are going, and why things are the way they are. Yet rarely does anyone tell us this. There are moments when alertness is no longer necessary. Not because you have given up, but because you have gone far enough to finally set everything down. And tonight, this video does not come to demand your attention. It does not ask you to remember anything. It does not expect you to understand everything that will be told. It is simply a very gentle invitation. An invitation into a slow journey where curiosity is not pushed, where thinking does not need to race toward any conclusion at all. Imagine that you are looking at the night sky, not in order to find answers, but simply to look. No measuring, no comparing, no naming. Just a vast openness present before you, and you are allowed to be there very small, very quiet, and with nothing you need to do. In that space, silence is not emptiness. It is where questions are allowed to rest. Philosophy in its most original form was never a debate. It began with wonder, with standing before something too vast, too deep, too difficult to grasp, and accepting that reason cannot hold it all. As Aristotle wrote in Metaphysics, "For it is owing to their wonder that men both now begin and at first began to philosophize." But perhaps he did not mean that wonder must lead to tension. Sometimes wonder needs only to lead to silence. In this journey, the universe will not be presented as a lesson. It does not appear to test your understanding. Instead, it arrives like a long, steady breath older than any human thought. Distant space is quiet. Stars, the slow movements of time, all of them exist without requiring anyone's attention. And within that lack of demand, there is a strangely reassuring sense of safety. Perhaps you are used to believing that if you do not understand, you are missing something important. But the Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once gently reminded us in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent. Silence here is not the failure of thought. It is its natural boundary and also its refuge. When you allow yourself not to understand everything, something very light can happen. Thoughts no longer need to line up to be solved. They no longer compete for attention. They can pass by like thin clouds crossing the night sky, appearing changing shape and dissolving without intervention. In the stories that follow, you may hear about the universe, about deep space, about discoveries that once overwhelmed humanity. But remember, what matters is not the information. What matters is the feeling they awaken, the feeling that you are not alone in your tiredness and that you have no obligation to remain fully alert. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Yet becoming aware of the darkness does not mean confronting it right now. Sometimes simply acknowledging that it is there and that you are allowed to rest beside it is enough. So if while listening you notice your breathing slowing, if the words begin to blur and lose their sharp edges, this is not a sign of distraction. It is a sign that you are entering the right orbit, an orbit that does not require absolute alertness, an orbit where the mind is allowed to loosen like an object drifting in space without a destination. This journey has no goal that must be reached before it ends. There is no conclusion waiting ahead, and if you fall asleep at any point, nothing meaningful is lost. On the contrary, sleep is the most natural completion of this journey. Tonight, you do not need to look too deeply. You do not need to understand anything shocking. You only need to allow yourself to be here for a moment, to listen briefly, and then to gently drift away, letting the universe continue the story for you. After setting down the need to stay alert, to follow closely, to understand everything in time, you may notice a very gentle emptiness forming in the mind. Not an emptiness of lack, but an emptiness that comes from no longer being pulled in every direction. And within that space, the story can continue slower, deeper, as if there is no longer a need to take steps forward, only to drift. Somewhere near the center of our galaxy, quietly and entirely unaware of human existence, there drifts a vast cloud known as Sagittarius B2. It does not shine brightly. It does not impress with grand dramatic images. It is simply a region of cold gas and dust suspended in the deep darkness of space. And yet within that silence, something quietly unexpected has been found. Chemical molecules so familiar they feel almost intimate. There exists ethyl formate, a compound that on Earth we associate with the scent of rum and the taste of ripe berries, not metaphorically. Not as a poetic comparison imposed afterward, but the very same chemical structure, the same atoms arranged in a familiar order, drifting through a cold emptiness, far removed from memory, culture, or any senses that have ever tasted it. When we first hear this, a very human reaction often arises: surprise, followed by a small laugh, as if the universe has just told a strange joke. But if you pause a little longer and let that reaction settle, what remains may not be humor, but a softness that is difficult to name. That in places so distant they cannot be touched, there still exist things that are not entirely unfamiliar. We often imagine the universe as cold, distant, and utterly unrelated to our small lives. But this discovery does not try to prove that the universe is like Earth. It only gently suggests that what we call familiar may not belong to us alone. The flavors, the scents, the sensations we once believed were born solely of history, memory, and culture may in fact have existed long before there were humans to remember them. In depth psychology, Carl Jung once suggested that human beings do not live only in the present, but carry layers of memory older than their own individual lives. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "The collective unconscious contains the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution, born anew in the brain structure of every individual." Perhaps something similar is true of the universe itself. The molecules drifting through deep space do not know that they will become scent flavor or memory. But when they arrive on Earth, enter the human body, and are bound to experience, they suddenly take on meaning. And this can invite us to look at ourselves with a gentler gaze. That our most private emotions, nostalgia, warmth, the sense of safety carried by a familiar smell, may arise from structures older than this planet itself, not to make us feel smaller, but to soften the absoluteness of our loneliness. If you are listening late at night, you may be in a quiet room with softened light and a body that has begun to loosen. When you think of those molecular clouds, you do not need to imagine them in detail. Simply feel this one simple thing: the universe is not entirely foreign. It is not a hostile place waiting to confront you. It simply exists silently, expansively, and sometimes within that existence it carries fragments that feel familiar without intending them for anyone in particular. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard, in The Poetics of Space, once wrote, "Immensity is within ourselves." Perhaps this is why, when we hear of vast spaces, we do not think only of physical size. We feel a gentle widening inside, as if there were more room for thoughts that do not need to be completed, for questions that do not need answers. And if we continue along this current, from familiar scents drifting through distant emptiness to the chemical reactions unfolding within our bodies right now, something slowly becomes clear. Life is not a break from the universe. It is a very slow continuation. Atoms that once drifted in darkness eventually became stars, then planets, then bodies, then sensations. And finally, in a very small moment, the awareness that is listening to this voice. There is no need to assign a grand meaning to this, no need to draw a philosophical conclusion. Simply allow the thought to remain for a moment, like a very faint light. That perhaps beneath everyday worries, there exists a quiet connection between you and everything else, without the need to understand it, without the need to control it. And when that thought has done its gentle work, you may let it drift away. Like molecules in deep space, unhurried, without purpose, without needing to be remembered. Simply existing very quietly within a universe that is not as unfamiliar as we once believed. When the thought of familiar scents drifting through deep space has had time to settle, the current of the story does not stop. It simply shifts into another rhythm, quieter, heavier, as if after realizing that the universe is not entirely foreign, we begin to ask a gentler question: if what feels familiar can exist where there is no one to sense it, then where does life begin? And does life truly need life in order to begin at all? In cold regions of space where light is so faint, it seems as though nothing could be happening. Scientists have discovered complex organic molecules. Not traces of organisms, not remnants of some ancient biology, simply chemical structures. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen connecting themselves, arranging themselves, existing on their own. They do not want to become life. They do not know that one day, under different conditions, they might form the basis for cells, for sensation, for consciousness. They are only doing what matter has always done, reacting, transforming, continuing. This can be unsettling because for a very long time, human beings have been used to believing that life is something so special it must require a distinct moment of origin, a spark, a miracle, an exception. But when we look more closely at the chemistry of the universe, no such clear boundary appears. There is no line marking where dead matter ends and life begins. There are only gradually increasing levels of complexity unfolding very slowly, very patiently. In this sense, the universe does not resemble a stage upon which life is invited to perform. It resembles a quiet laboratory. No supervisor, no final plan, no list of objectives pinned to the wall. Reactions occur because conditions allow them to occur. Molecules form because temperature, pressure, and time are sufficient. And within that persistent repetition, structures sometimes emerge that are complex enough to react with themselves. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza once wrote in Ethics, "Nature does not act with an end in view." The sentence can sound cold at first, but if you allow it to remain for a moment, you may sense the freedom it carries. If nature does not act toward a predetermined purpose, then your existence does not need to constantly justify itself. You do not need to prove that you have a valid reason to be here. You are simply continuing a chain of reactions that began long before there was anyone to ask questions. Seen this way, Earth no longer appears as a fragile exception in an indifferent universe. It becomes a particular case, a place where conditions happen to intersect for long enough, not because it was chosen, but because it was not excluded. Life was not made especially for this planet. It was a possibility that opened, and here that possibility traveled a little farther. This thought can soften a deep worry many people carry, the fear that if one is not special, then one has no meaning. But perhaps meaning does not come from uniqueness. Perhaps it comes from continuity, from being a very small link in a process so long it cannot be fully grasped. And within that process, your presence, even for a brief moment in cosmic time, is already rare in its own quiet way. In existential psychology, Viktor Frankl observed that human beings often suffer not because they lack answers, but because they believe there must be a single answer. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, but a quest for meaning." Yet perhaps before searching for meaning, we must allow ourselves to exist without assigning one. Like organic molecules drifting through deep space, they do not know what they are for, and precisely because of that, they are free to become whatever conditions allow. If you are listening now, you do not need to follow every detail. You do not need to remember the names of molecules or imagine exactly where they were found. Simply sense one gentle idea that life does not begin with a decision, but with patience, and that you, like everything else, are the result of countless events that unfolded without needing anyone's consent. This does not make you smaller. It places you where you belong, not at the center, but not at the margins either. You are within the current, and that current does not require full understanding in order to allow rest. As the German philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, "Being is not something that can be grasped. There are things that slip away the tighter we try to hold them, and there are things that reveal themselves only when we loosen our grip, appearing as a very gentle feeling. The universe, like a laboratory without lights, continues to operate. Chemical reactions keep unfolding whether anyone observes them or not, and in this moment your body is doing the same. Billions of small reactions are taking place in every cell without your direction, without your understanding. They need only one thing from you: permission to rest. So if this thought makes you feel lighter, let it stay for a while. If it does not, you may also let it drift away. There is no requirement to hold on to anything, no test waiting ahead, only a very quiet truth that long before there was life to ask questions, the universe had already learned how to form its seeds silently, patiently, and without haste. When the thought of organic molecules quietly drifting through deep space has been allowed to linger long enough, the story naturally opens into another layer, unhurried, unbroken. If chemistry can arise without life, then perhaps life itself does not begin in the way we have long imagined. It does not flare up in a single moment. It is cooked slowly, very slowly, in a kitchen so vast it has no walls. Imagine the universe as an immense kitchen with no chef, no written recipe, no deadline to meet. Their clouds of gas and dust swirl, contract, heat up. Stars are born blaze, then grow old. Heavier elements are forged in stellar cores and scattered when stars explode. Each of these movements resembles an ancient act of cooking, heating, stirring, cooling, repeated over billions of years. Not to serve anyone, but simply because the conditions allow it. Within this chemical soup, the ingredients existed long before there were humans to name them. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. The letters of life did not wait for life to appear before coming into being. They were formed in natural furnaces, then drifted, combined, separated, and combined again. Planets emerged from these fragments like pots placed in just the right position to continue cooking in another rhythm with or without water, with or without an atmosphere, with or without enough time. Seen this way, origin is no longer a sharp marker. It softens like dough that has rested long enough. We no longer need to ask when did life begin, but can ask more gently, when did the conditions become ripe? And even that question does not demand an immediate answer. In this kitchen, there is no timer. Time itself is an ingredient, not a pressure. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus once wrote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." This line is often read as a reminder of change. But if we listen more slowly, we may hear something else as well. There is no fixed moment of beginning. There is only flow, only continuation. And life seen this way is not a sudden exception, but a ripple that appears when the current allows it to rise. Perhaps this is why when humans search for origins, we often carry an invisible tension. We want a clear starting point to feel secure, as if knowing where we came from would tell us where we must go. But the universe's kitchen does not operate according to that psychological need. It does not offer a single anchor point. It offers a process long, complex, and with no intention of ending quickly. In Phenomenology of Spirit, GWWF, Hegel wrote, "The true is the whole. If truth is the whole, then compressing it into a single moment of origin may impoverish it. The whole includes periods of waiting, failed attempts, planets that never hosted life stars that burned out before illuminating anything at all. And within that whole Earth is simply one batch that happened to go a little farther. This thought does not strip life of its beauty. On the contrary, it softens that beauty. For if all the ingredients existed long before humans appeared, then your presence is not a burden that must be justified. You do not need to earn your right to exist. You are simply continuing a process that began long ago and is unfolding everywhere, whether or not there is anyone to name it. On quiet nights when the body is tired and the mind begins to loosen, the image of such a cosmic kitchen can bring a strange sense of safety. Not because it promises anything, but because it demands nothing. You are not the center of the recipe, nor are you a missing ingredient. You are simply part of a batch still simmering enough to be here, enough to rest. Albert Camus once wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. But perhaps before struggle, there is something else: permission to stop, to set the spoon down, to let the pot continue to simmer on low heat without intervention, to trust that not everything requires your hands." As you listen to these words, billions of chemical reactions are likely unfolding within your body, just as they are out there among the stars. They do not wait for your understanding. They do not ask for your attention. They require only enough conditions, a slower breath, a nervous system allowed to soften a sleep drawing near. And in that moment, the idea of origins can slip gently from your shoulders. Not because it has been resolved, but because it is no longer necessary right now. You do not need to return to the beginning in order to rest. You only need to remain within the process like an ingredient that has finished its work for today. The cosmic kitchen continues to cook whether you are awake or asleep. Stars are still being born and fading away. Planets continue along their orbits. And you tonight may allow yourself the simplest act of all, to let everything continue in your place while you drift into a quiet, warm enough to sleep. While the idea of the cosmic kitchen still lingers warmly in the mind, the story shifts once more, not toward something louder, but toward an image that is quieter, harder, and faintly luminous. If all the ingredients of life have been slowly cooked by time, then sometimes the result of that process is not biology, but crystal. Not life, but beauty, existing without the need to be used. In distant regions of space, scientists have proposed the existence of planets where carbon reigns supreme. Under immense pressure and extreme temperatures, carbon is no longer coal, no longer dust, but crystallizes into rigid, transparent structures. There, the surface may not be green, may hold no water, no organisms, but instead form a world of crystal where trillions upon trillions of atoms are pressed into perfect order. Planets made of diamond. At first, hearing this easily awakens a very human imagination. We think of value, of rarity, of what on earth is bound to power desire and ownership. But if you pause a little longer and allow the image to settle, something curious emerges there. Diamonds have no value at all. There is no one to desire them, no one to hoard them, no one to place them on another's hand. Value, it turns out, does not reside in matter. It resides in need. And where there is no need, preciousness becomes an empty label. The philosopher Immanuel Kant made a clear distinction between beauty and usefulness. In Critique of Judgment, he wrote, "Beauty is purposiveness without purpose." Beauty in this sense does not need to serve anything. It does not need a reason to exist. And those diamond planets stand as a quiet illustration of this truth. Beauty exists entirely independent of humanity, of the gaze, of evaluation. This realization can make us feel small, but it can also make us lighter. For if beauty does not need us in order to exist, then perhaps we too do not need to constantly turn ourselves into something valuable in someone else's eyes in order to be allowed here. We do not need to harden like diamonds. We do not need to endure pressure to become worthy. We can exist in our present form, unfinished, uncrystallized, yet real enough. In Depth Psychology, Carl Jung warned of the danger of identifying oneself with idealized images. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "The individual who wishes to be in accord with himself must come to terms with his own uniqueness." Yet modern society often whispers something else, that we are only valuable when we are rare, hard, bright, like a polished diamond. And it is precisely for this reason that the image of diamond worlds, uninhabited, unobserved, unneeded, carries a strange healing power. It reminds us that value is not a natural property of existence. It is a story that is told. In the universe, such stories do not need to exist. Carbon need only endure sufficient pressure to become crystal. It does not need to be called beautiful. It does not need to be desired in order to continue being itself. And within that silence lies a gentle lesson. There are things that exist simply because conditions allow them to exist. No more, no less. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. But perhaps before the dancing star, there are structures that do not dance, do not move, do not perform, that simply rest there silent in the final form shaped by pressure and time. Not everything needs to become something else. Some things are already enough in their present state." If you are listening now, you may be carrying a great deal of pressure to be valuable, to be useful, to contribute, to prove that your existence makes sense. But tonight, as you think of those diamond planets, beautiful without being needed, you may allow a very gentle thought to arise that existence does not always require justification. Beauty, when detached from need, becomes quiet, and human beings, when not forced to be valuable, can become quiet in the same way. This is not resignation, but a temporary laying down of the burden of having to shine, permission to be dim, to be soft, to be imperfect, to rest. The French philosopher Simone Weil wrote in Gravity and Grace, "Attention taken to its highest degree is the same thing as prayer." But sometimes what is needed is not heightened attention, but the act of stopping the gaze that measures and evaluates oneself, allowing attention to dissolve like light reflected on a crystal surface, present for a moment, then gone, leaving nothing to hold. Those diamond planets may never be touched by human hands, and that does not diminish them. On the contrary, it is precisely their untouched state that keeps them whole within the universe's gentle indifference. Unmined, uncompared, unpriced, simply existing. And in this moment, as your body continues to soften and your breathing slows, you may let that image drift through your mind, not as something to admire, but as a permission. That you do not need to become a diamond in order to be here. That you do not need to endure any more pressure today. The universe has room for both what sparkles and what is ordinary. And within that flow, you may allow yourself to be a part that does not need to shine, only to exist very quietly until sleep gently closes the long day. After imagining those shimmering worlds where beauty exists without an observer, the current of thought naturally continues toward a slower, deeper realization. that there are places in the universe too precious to touch, not because they are fragile, but because they are so extreme that all familiar forms of life simply cannot survive there. And within that extremity, the universe reveals a very gentle truth. It was not designed to please anyone. Temperatures on those worlds may be high enough to vaporize metal or low enough to freeze matter into stillness. Gravity may be strong enough to crush any delicate structure or so weak that it cannot hold an atmosphere at all. Those glittering planets are not lacking in beauty, they simply lack the conditions that would allow humans to set foot there and call them home. And perhaps here, a deeply human misunderstanding begins to loosen the belief that beauty must always come with welcome. We often assume that if something is beautiful, it must be meant for someone. If something is precious, it must be used. But the universe does not share this belief. It allows beauty to exist without life. It lets radiant worlds drift in silence, without footprints, without calls. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it is neutral. It does not favor, and it does not punish. It simply operates. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza once wrote in Ethics, things could not have been produced by God in any other way or in any other order than is the case. Whether we call it God or nature, the idea remains the same. Reality is not arranged to meet our expectations. It unfolds according to its own laws. And if something makes us feel excluded, that is not rejection, it is simply the truth that not every place needs us. At first, this thought may carry a very soft sadness, that the universe is so vast, so beautiful, and yet not made for humans. But if we stay with that feeling a little longer without rushing to respond, another tenderness can appear. That not being invited everywhere also means we are not responsible for everything. We do not need to understand it all. We do not need to conquer it all. We do not need to turn every form of beauty into a resource. Albert Camus once wrote in The Stranger, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." But Camus also understood that there are heights that do not need to be climbed. There are places meant only to be seen from afar. And in accepting that distance, we may discover another kind of peace, the peace of not always having to move forward. Worlds too extreme to touch remind us that our form of life is fragile, not because it is weak, but because it depends on very specific conditions. And that realization, rather than frightening us, can invite gratitude. Not a clinging kind of gratitude, but a gentle one. The kind that knows there are limits, and that limits are not always failures. In psychology, accepting limits is an essential step toward healing. Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." Acceptance is not only about accepting oneself, but also about accepting that there are spaces we do not belong to, and not belonging does not diminish us. It simply places us where we are able to exist. When we think of brilliant planets that cannot be reached, we may see reflected in them very familiar longings, the desire to meet standards, ideals, perfect images. We often believe that if we try hard enough, endure enough pressure, withstand enough heat, we will be able to live in those places literally or metaphorically. But the universe whispers something else. Not every shining place is meant for life, and not every ideal needs to be pursued. There are dreams so beautiful they should be kept at a safe distance. Images so perfect that if we try to touch them, we risk losing ourselves. And within that gentle discernment, a quiet care for the mind begins to form. We learn not to force ourselves into higher temperatures, not to place ourselves into crushing orbits. Friedrich Nietzsche warned in Beyond Good and Evil, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." But sometimes the monster is not something evil. It is simply an environment that does not suit us. And wisdom lies in knowing when to stop, in knowing when observation from a distance is enough. Tonight, as you listen, you may notice your body feeling a little lighter, your breath slowing, your thoughts no longer competing to be resolved, and the image of worlds too precious to touch can become a gentle metaphor that you do not need to survive everywhere. You only need to survive here within the conditions that are yours. The universe was not designed to please anyone, but for that very reason, it places no demands upon you. It does not ask you to become harsher in order to be worthy. It does not require you to endure more pressure to exist. It simply continues so that in this moment you may allow yourself to rest within your own safe limits. And when that thought has stayed long enough, you may let it drift away. Like light reflected from a distant world, brilliant but untouchable. You can close your eyes and let the universe continue its work. And you tonight are allowed to remain where it is just warm enough, just light enough for sleep to arrive naturally without having to conquer anything more. After accepting that there are radiant worlds not meant for life, the current of the story gently tilts toward another experience no longer about place, but about time. Not time as the clock on the wall, not the schedule of a busy day, but time as something far softer than we once believed. And near a black hole, this is no longer metaphor. It is physics. As an object approaches a black hole, its time slows relative to a distant observer. Not a subjective feeling, not an illusion, but a measurable difference. 1 second here is no longer 1 second there. Clocks no longer step together. Time, what we assume to be the most stable foundation of reality, suddenly becomes relative bending, stretching, flowing with the structure of space itself. Albert Einstein once wrote in Relativity, the Special and the General Theory, "The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Heard too quickly, the line can feel unsettling. Heard slowly at night, it carries a strange comfort. If the boundaries between past, present, and future are not absolute, then perhaps the pressures we place upon right now are not as absolute as we think. Near a black hole, time does not only slow, it loses synchrony. Each vantage point carries its own rhythm. And set beside human life, this opens a very gentle realization our pace is only a slice. Not a standard, not a center. Just one way time passes through a very small being under very specific conditions. We often live as if time were chasing us, as if slowing down meant being left behind. But the universe does not operate that way. It has no correct tempo. It has only different tempos. And near a black hole, that difference becomes unmistakable. The philosopher Henri Bergson, who devoted his life to thinking about time, wrote in Time and Free Will, "Time is not a thing, it is a lived experience. Time is not an object to be measured, but an experience to be lived through. And if that experience can slow near a black hole, then perhaps in very small moments of life, it can also slow when we allow it. As you listen now, your time does not need to match anyone else's. You do not need to keep pace with any rhythm. There is no invisible speed you must satisfy. The human tempo in the end is simply the way time moves through a body, with a heart, with lungs, with a need for rest. And at night, that tempo is allowed to slow." Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, time is not a sequence of now points. Time is not a line of no's waiting to be resolved. It is an open field in which existence unfolds. And when we stop trying to grasp each moment, that field can grow quieter. In popular imagination, black holes are often linked to destruction. But here they offer another lesson. Time is not a universal pressure. It can stretch. It can differ from place to place. And so, when time feels too fast, too slow, or too heavy, it is not a personal failure. It is simply the way you are situated within the flow. If there is anything that exhausts us most, it may not be a lack of time, but the belief that time is always against us. When we think of clocks running slow near a black hole, a very gentle thought can arise. Time does not intend to wear us down. It follows the structure of space and of ourselves. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live." This line is often heard as a call to urgency, but it can also be heard as permission that we do not need to carry the entire future into the present. We only need to remain within this slice enough for one deep breath, enough for a pause. Set beside the rhythm of the universe, the human pace is not small in a trivial sense. It is simply specific. And that specificity allows rest. No comparison, no chasing, no need to make time useful. As the night deepens and the idea of time slowing begins to sink into the body, you may feel your heartbeat steady, your breath lengthen. Thoughts no longer lining up to be solved before sleep. Time in this moment is not something to manage. It is something to be with. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "All things are entangled, ensnared, enamored." Space-time and awareness are woven together, and within that weaving there is no single rhythm you must obey. Near a black hole, time slows, not because someone wills it so, but because conditions make it so. And in life, the conditions for slowness can be just a simple permission. Permission not to rush, permission not to understand everything, permission not to be everywhere at once. When that thought has stayed long enough, you may let it dissolve like light stretched as it passes through a strong gravitational field. Not disappearing, only changing form. And in that new form, time is no longer a pursuer, but a wide enough current for you to drift into sleep. The universe continues to bend space and time in its own way. And you tonight may allow your rhythm to slow, not because you are near a black hole, but because you have allowed yourself to rest within this very human slice of existence. And when the rhythm is slow enough, sleep will arrive unforced, unnamed, and gentle. As the idea of time slowing continues to spread like a gentle wave, the story quietly turns toward another question, not loudly, not demanding an immediate answer. What if Earth is not the only world that has ever lived? What if life has tried itself in many places under many conditions, and most of those attempts quietly came to an end, leaving no one behind to tell the story? This thought does not arrive as a tragedy. It arrives slowly, like a realization. That life may not be a crown placed upon a chosen planet, but a process trying, failing, adapting, and sometimes stopping. In deep space, where conditions are constantly shifting, there may once have been worlds warmer than they are now, with liquid water, thick atmospheres, and enough time for chemistry to go far. And then, because of something very small, an orbit drifting, a weakening magnetic field, a star growing violent, that thread of life gently faded. When we think of failed planets, the word failed sounds heavy. But that is a deeply human way of seeing. The universe does not speak in the language of success and failure. It does not judge. It simply continues. Worlds that once could support life completed their part in that flow. They were not condemned. They simply did not endure. This softens a familiar belief that Earth is chosen. If life has sprouted in many places, then Earth is not a sacred exception. It is the one that is still standing. Nothing more, nothing less. And that phrase, still standing, carries a gentle humility, no eternal promise, no guarantee, only a chain of contingent conditions that for now remain in balance. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote in Fear and Trembling, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Perhaps this is also true of planets. We can only understand their stories in retrospect once we know what was lost. While living in the present life does the only thing it can do, it continues. Placed within this picture, human beings are no longer the center, but neither are we pushed to the margins. We become part of a very long experiment in which many variables have been tried and many have led nowhere. Rather than making us anxious, this can make us lighter, because if Earth is not chosen, then we too are not a burden required to prove our worthiness. There is a quiet pressure in believing that we live on a favored planet, as if we must live in a way that justifies the gift. But if we live on a planet that is still standing through chance, through fragile balance, then the most reasonable response is not pride, but care. Care in the gentlest sense, tending to those fragile conditions so they may continue a little longer. In Being and Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Existence precedes essence." For worlds, this can be heard very quietly. They exist before any story is assigned to them. Life, if it appears, carries no pre-written mission. It simply finds a way to persist, or it does not. If you are listening now, you may also carry the sense that you have tried many times in your own life, paths that once held promise, relationships that once held warmth, versions of yourself that once felt alive, and then because of a small shift did not endure. Thinking of failed planets can allow us to look back at ourselves more gently. Not enduring does not mean meaningless. It is simply one chapter within a much longer process. Albert Camus once wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "In the depth of winter I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. But perhaps before that invincible summer there were winters that passed and never returned." They did not diminish Camus. They gave depth to the experience of being real. If Earth is the one still standing, then standing does not mean standing still. It is a state of balance. Everything could tilt at any moment. And because of that, life here carries a fragile beauty, not the beauty of permanence, but of temporariness extended. At night, as thoughts slow, this idea can become a thin blanket, not heavy enough to press down, not too thin to leave you cold. That you do not need to live as though you represent a sacred choice. You only need to live as a being that is still standing with breath, with relationships, with small acts of care. Martin Heidegger once noted, "In being and time, care is the basic state of being." Care is not a burden. It is a way of existing for planets, for life, for oneself. Nothing grand is required, only enough. And if there have been worlds that once lived and then quietly went dark, that does not make this story sadder. It makes it truer. There is no promise that everything will last, only an invitation to be fully present within this slice while it is still here. When that thought has lingered long enough, you may let it dissolve. No conclusion is needed, no final point to be made. Just a very light peace that Earth is not chosen, and you do not need to be chosen either. You are simply living within a moment that is still standing, and tonight that is enough to set everything down. Soften the body and allow sleep to arrive as a natural part of the process. As the idea of worlds that once stood firm lingers like a long, quiet breath, the current of the story drifts toward another image, worlds that once had oceans and skies. Not distant points of light, but very close neighbors, places that were once more like Earth than we might expect, close enough to be called almost Earths. There was a time when Mars was not the dry, dust-red planet we see today. Traces of ancient riverbeds, floodplains, and minerals that form only in water still remain like memories that have not yet fully faded. And Venus, before becoming a vast pressure furnace, may once have had shallow oceans, thick clouds, and a gentler climate rhythm. None of this guarantees that life emerged there, but neither does it rule out that conditions once came close enough. Those worlds did not vanish in a dramatic instant. They changed very slowly. A magnetic field weakened, a central star grew hotter, a chain of climate feedbacks unfolded over time, and then little by little water evaporated, atmospheres drifted away, skies closed. When conditions changed, the story closed without needing a loud ending. There is a very soft sadness in thinking about this. Not a tragic sadness, but the sadness of realizing that there are no eternal promises in the universe. Not for planets, not for climates, and not for the states we grow accustomed to calling normal. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote in Letters from a Stoic, "Nothing is ours except time. Yet even time offers no guarantee that it will keep everything intact. It only allows things to remain for a while." Almost Earths remind us that stability is a temporary grace, a span long enough for a story to unfold but never long enough to assure it. And because of that, the beauty of oceans that once existed, even if only in the past, is not diminished. It simply does not continue. This does not make the story meaningless. It makes it true. In human life, we often pass through such oceans as well, periods that were calm, full, held beneath a familiar sky. And then, because of very small changes, a decision, a circumstance, an event, conditions no longer hold. The story closes. Not because someone failed, simply because the conditions changed. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us in Meditations, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change." But this observation is not meant to harden us. It is meant to soften us before change, so that when a sky is no longer there, we do not read it as a betrayal of life, but as its rhythm. When we think of Mars and Venus, we may find in them a gentle lesson that life is not a possession, but a temporary state being held. It requires many conditions at once, and only one small deviation can change everything. This does not make life less valuable. It makes each moment of life more worth inhabiting. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard once wrote in The Poetics of Space, "The house shelters daydreaming, the house protects the dreamer. But houses, whether human homes or a planet's home, protect dreams only while conditions allow. When conditions change, the dream is not betrayed. It simply moves." If you are listening now, you may also be carrying a very quiet regret. For a time when the sky was different. For an ocean that once sustained you. Thinking of worlds that have closed, we can allow ourselves to grieve without self-blame. Because not every ending is a failure. Many stories end because they have reached the limits of their conditions. Albert Camus once wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "The realization that life is absurd cannot be an end but a beginning." Perhaps realizing that there are no eternal promises is not an ending either. It is a softer beginning, the beginning of appreciation without clinging. Worlds that once had oceans and skies teach us how to be present without demanding permanence. They teach us how to care for the conditions we have, not because we believe they will last forever, but because they are here. And while they are here, they deserve to be lived fully. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time Anxiety Reveals the Nothing. Yet within the anxiety of loss, we may also find a very gentle clarity that every moment of stability is a gift without a contract. And precisely because there is no contract, the gift becomes pure. As the night deepens and your breathing slows, the image of these almost Earths may pass through your mind like old paintings, not to invite regret, but understanding. Understanding that life does not promise, nor does it demand. It arrives when conditions allow and departs when conditions change. And we within this slice are permitted to remain quietly within the conditions that are holding us. And if tomorrow the conditions shift, that does not render what has been meaningless. It simply closes the story at the right time. Tonight, you do not need to resolve that. You only need to be here beneath your present sky to feel a very gentle stillness, and to let sleep arrive like a soft receding tide closing the long day without needing any promise for tomorrow. As images of drained oceans and sealed skies continue to drift quietly through the mind, the current of the story naturally arrives at a deeper realization: the fragility of a living planet. Not fragility in the sense of weakness, but fragility in the sense of having to hold many things together at once. Let a single factor slip, and the entire balance can shift. A living planet does not need water alone. It needs an atmosphere thick enough to retain heat, yet thin enough not to crush. It needs a magnetic field strong enough to shield against radiation, yet stable enough not to fade away. It must sit at the right distance from its star, not so close as to burn, not so far as to freeze. And above all, it needs time, a great deal of time, for slow processes to unfold. Life, therefore, is not a given. It is the outcome of a delicate balance where many conditions must not only arise but persist together long enough. This softens the idea that existence is automatic. Instead, existence becomes something that is being held gently, precariously, and worth caring for. The ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus once wrote in Discourses, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, rather wish that what happens happen the way it happens." Perhaps a living planet wishes in this way as well, not in the sense of intention, but of alignment with conditions. When conditions allow, life unfolds. When conditions change, life changes with them. There is no betrayal, only flow. Seen this way, Earth is not an impregnable fortress. It is more like a scale that must constantly adjust. The atmosphere must be renewed. The magnetic field must continue to be generated from the planet's core. The distance from the star must be maintained in a stable orbit. And all of this happens silently, without needing anyone to notice, without needing credit. At night, when the mind grows quieter, this thought can bring an unexpected gentleness. That existence is not a fixed state, but an activity carried out moment by moment, breath by breath. And so feeling tired is not a failure. It is a sign that you are engaged in your own process of balance. Martin Heidegger once wrote, "In being and time to be is to be in the world. Not to stand above the world, not to control it, but to be within it with all its conditions, limits, and fragilities." A living planet does not stand apart from the forces acting upon it. Human beings do not either. We often believe we must be strong, resilient, untouched, but life has never existed that way. It persists through sensitivity to its environment, through response, through adjustment. And that sensitivity, rather than being a weakness, is what allows life to continue. The French philosopher Simone Weil wrote, "In gravity and grace, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." A living planet requires attention in a very natural sense, not human attention, but the attention of physical processes to one another. Each small change is listened to and answered. And in human life, perhaps what we lack most is not strength, but gentle attention to our own fragile balances. As you listen now, your body too is holding a delicate equilibrium. Heartbeat, breath, temperature, hormones, all adjusting in silence. You do not need to control them. You only need not to interfere. And at night, as interference lessens, that balance can reveal itself more clearly. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." That source of strength is not hardness. It is the capacity to remain balanced amid changing conditions. And sometimes that requires only one small act, allowing yourself to rest. The fragility of a living planet is not a pessimistic warning. It is a gentle reminder that all existence is delicately temporary. Nothing needs to be eternal to be meaningful. A span long enough for life to unfold is already rare. Albert Camus once wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. But perhaps for life, it is not always about climbing upward. Sometimes it is about not slipping away from balance. And on many nights that work is completed through sleep. When you allow yourself to sleep, you are not leaving the world. You are participating in an ancient rhythm, one that every living being needs in order to continue. Sleep is the body's way of saying balance must be restored. And within that restoration, there is a deep sense of safety. The universe does not promise that every living planet will continue forever, but it also does not demand more than this. It simply allows a fragile state to exist for as long as conditions are sufficient. And in this moment, your conditions softened, light, steady, sound slowed, breath are sufficient. You do not need to do anything more to earn your existence. You only need to remain within the present balance. And if that balance calls for sleep, then sleep is not escape. It is part of how life continues. When this thought has stayed long enough, you may let it dissolve. No conclusion is required. Nothing needs to be held. Just a very light peace that existence, though fragile, is still unfolding, and tonight you are allowed to relax within that fragility, letting every quiet balance do its work as you drift gently into sleep. As the sense of a living planet's fragility continues to resonate softly in the mind, the current of the story drifts farther outward, not to make things colder, but lighter. Light enough that Earth, with all its green, its history, and its noise, gradually contracts into a very small point against the deep black background of space. Imagine that moment when human beings look at Earth from very far away. No blue oceans, no continents, no borders, only a faint, fragile point of light suspended quietly in a vastness so wide it has no direction. At that distance, all differences dissolve. Conflicts, victories, fears, and even hopes once considered immense, all of them rest together within a single tiny glow. And it is there that a very natural humility arises. Not a humility imposed by morality, but one born of perspective. Human beings often live as if they stand at the center of the story, the center of the era, the center of the problem. But from far away, that center dissolves. Earth is no longer in the middle. It is only one point among countless others drifting through spaces with no intention of favoring anyone. This does not render humanity meaningless. It simply makes the ego lighter. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius once advised, "Consider often the connection of all things in the universe." When we truly consider that connection not with a hurried mind, but with a slow gaze, we realize that human history, with all its tragedy and glory, is only a very thin slice of a far larger process. Every civilization that has existed, every city that once shone, every story ever told, all of it unfolded on a surface so small that from a distance it can no longer be distinguished. Not to deny their value, but to place them in their proper scale. And when scale is adjusted, something very gentle happens, pressure eases. The pressure to be great. The pressure to leave a mark. The pressure to be remembered. From a cosmic distance, there is no such demand. That point of light does not require history to be grand. It simply exists. And perhaps human beings can allow themselves to exist in that way as well, without having to inflate the meaning of every moment. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote in Pensée, "The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me. That fear is real. But if we remain with that silence long enough, it can transform from fear into reassurance. Because within infinite silence, there is no one watching to judge, no measure waiting for you to reach it. Only space, vast, neutral, and undemanding. As Earth slowly fades from view, what remains is not nothingness. What remains is context. A context large enough to hold every story, yet not governed by any one of them. And within that context, our very human worries about right and wrong enough and not enough more and less begin to loosen. Not because they do not matter, but because they do not need to carry the weight of the universe. In Being and Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Man is condemned to be free, but perhaps part of that freedom comes from seeing oneself as small, from realizing one is not the center of every frame of reference. And when we step out of the center, we are free to step aside, to sit down, and to breathe." The humility that appears here is not self-erasure. It is liberation from having to play the main role in every scene. You do not need to carry the meaning of the whole world. You only need to carry your own experience within this very small slice. If you are listening now, you may be in a quiet room. Soft light, steady sound, and somewhere within you there may be a long-held tension, the tension of needing to matter. Thinking of Earth as a distant point of light, you may allow that tension to soften. Not to vanish entirely, just to become a little lighter. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Small and hidden is the door that leads inward." That door becomes easier to open when the ego no longer needs to swell for protection. When we allow ourselves to be small within the universe, there is more room to move inward. And inside, there may be no great answers, only a sense of safety sufficient for rest. Enough quiet to stop pursuing anything further. From far away, all of human history rests in a single point of light. From close up, your life needs only to be just enough to unfold, no stage lights required. The Greek philosopher Epicurus once observed, "Death is nothing to us. But before death, there is something else that can also become nothing in a gentle way, the need to be central. When we no longer need to be the center, many fears naturally fall away. As the night deepens, the image of that point of light may blur and fade in your mind. There is no need to hold on to it. It has done its work adjusting perspective, lightening the ego, opening a quiet space. And in that space, humility is no longer a lesson, it is a state. You do not need to do anything with that humility. You do not need to apply it. You do not need to remember it. Simply let it be there like the deep black background behind the point of light, vast, silent, and safe enough to set everything down. From far away, Earth is only a very small dot, and tonight you do not need to be large. You only need to remain within your very human slice. Allow your body to soften, let your breathing slow, and permit sleep to arrive as a natural part of not having to carry the whole universe when you close your eyes. As the image of Earth gradually shrinking into a distant point of light fades, the flow of the story does not end in smallness. It turns back very slowly toward what is closest, the human body. As if after traveling far enough to loosen the grip of the ego, we can return and see what is familiar with different eyes. That in this quiet, your own body is a miniature universe operating steadily and silently without requiring the supervision of consciousness. When you sleep, the brain does not shut down. It changes phase. Networks of memory are reorganized. The day's experiences are lifted from the noisy surface and placed into deeper layers. New connections are tested, then kept or released. Life here does not rest. It shifts modes. And it is within this mode that what daytime cannot reach healing integration, softening begins to take place. William James once wrote in The Principles of Psychology, "The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. But at night, the body chooses for you. It releases thoughts that are no longer needed. It favors balance over victory. And in being chosen, for there is an ancient safety, you do not have to control everything in order to be okay." There is a very gentle truth science has revealed. The human body emits a faint light in the darkness, too subtle for the naked eye, not meant to be displayed, simply the byproduct of ongoing biological reactions, energy released then radiated like a whisper. That light does not aim to illuminate a path. It only shows that life is still here even when no one is watching. This thought can ease a familiar worry, the fear that if we stop paying attention, if we stop trying, everything will collapse. But the body does not work that way. It runs on laws deeper than consciousness. It breathes, filters, repairs balances, all in silence. And when we sleep, we are not abandoning life. We are returning its operation to itself. Baruch Spinoza wrote in Ethics, "The human body can be affected in many ways by which its power of acting is increased or diminished. Sleep does not diminish that power. It restores it. It resets the conditions so that strength can continue in a more sustainable way. To think of the body as a miniature universe does not require exaggeration, only recognition of similarity. Like the cosmos, the body has its own rhythms, cycles of light and dark, chain reactions, fragile balances that must be maintained. And like the universe, most of what matters most happens beyond our attention." Carl Jung wrote in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good. Sleep opens a gentle door to that unconscious layer, not to confront it, not to decode it, but simply to be with it. And in that being with many things quietly find their place. If during the day you have had to hold yourself together to be clear, rational, directed, the night allows you to blur. Not to lose direction, but to no longer require strong light. Just as distant stars appear only when the sky is dark enough, deeper processes in the body need the dimming of consciousness to do their work. You may be hearing this as your eyelids grow heavy, as your breath lengthens, as thoughts begin to drift no longer lining up. That is not you missing anything. It is the sign that this miniature universe is moving into its night shift. And the night shift does not need an audience. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us in Meditations, nature does nothing uselessly. If your body leads you into sleep, it is not avoidance, it is function. A function refined over millions of years of evolution, one that understands life cannot continue without darkness deep enough. The fact that the body emits a faint light in the dark is not meant to astonish you. It is simply a beautiful image to remember this: you are alive, even when you are not trying to be. And sometimes that is precisely what heals the exhaustion of having to strive constantly. In Being and Time, Martin Heidegger wrote, "Restlessness is the basic mode of everyday being, but night is when restlessness is set down, not to vanish forever, but to rest. And when restlessness rests, life does not stop. It works differently quietly, precisely without display. If you allow yourself to feel this, a fragile trust may begin to form. Trust that not everything requires your attention. Trust that some processes are wise enough to run on their own. Trust that you can let go for a while. The human body, like a miniature universe, does not require you to understand it fully in order to care for it. It only asks that you do not interfere. A quiet room, soft light, slower breath. That is enough for the stars within you to continue moving along their orbits. And when this thought has stayed long enough, you may let it dissolve. Nothing to remember, no conclusion to draw, only a very gentle warmth of being carried, of living without having to steer, of resting while life continues. Out there, the universe keeps expanding. In here, this smaller universe keeps working. And between the two, you do not need to stand guard. You only need to sleep as the deepest act of trust. Close your eyes, let the darkness be gentle around you, and allow the body to do what it has known how to do for a very long time. Keep life going quietly until the new day finds its way back. When the idea of the body as a miniature universe has had time to settle, the flow of the story slips into an even softer state sleep. Not as an absence, not as disappearance, but as a very ancient phase shift. Like water no longer being water in the way we usually name it, yet not quite becoming vapor. It simply changes form in order to continue. Sleep has never been a shutdown. It is a re-synchronization. As the light softens and the breath slows, the brain does not stop working, it changes its task. Scattered memories from the day are gathered. Emotions that could not be processed in time are placed within a wider context. Small inner conflicts are softened. At the deepest level, the body begins its repair cells, regenerate the immune system, recalibrates hormones, return to their natural rhythm. Life does not leave, it moves into the night shift. In an enquiry concerning human understanding, David Hume wrote, "Reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions. By day reason attempts to govern. By night it steps back, yielding to deeper processes where emotion, memory, and the body find their own order. No direction required, no supervision needed. Only conditions sufficient for the phase shift to occur." Sleep in this sense is a biological act far older than any philosophy. Before there was language to describe it, before there were texts to record it, living beings had already learned to withdraw into darkness in order to continue. The rhythm of light and dark is not a habit. It is a foundational law. And when you enter sleep, you are aligning with something larger than yourself, the cycle of the planet, of the biosphere, of a turning universe. Aristotle once observed in De Anima sleep is a sort of privation, yet it is a privation with purpose, an absence with intention. It may sound paradoxical, yet that very paradox is what makes sleep gentle. You lack alertness so that you may be cared for. You lack control so that things may be arranged. You lack attention so that what matters most can take place. If during the day you have tried hard to understand, to decide to keep yourself oriented, then night offers another kind of understanding through letting go of unanswered questions, letting go of plans not yet formed, letting go even of the need to conclude, and within that release, a wordless order appears, in being and nothingness. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Consciousness is a being such that in its being is in question." Sleep is the moment when that question is allowed to rest, not because it has been answered, but because night does not require it to be asked. Night allows life to continue without justification. As you listen, signs of the transition may already be present. Heavier eyelids, slower thoughts, images blending into one another. This is not distraction, it is synchronization. Like instruments ceasing their solos and returning to a deep, steady, warm harmony. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny." Sleep is the weaving you do not need to watch. You do not have to hold the loom. You only need to lie still and let the fabric continue to form. Sleep as an ancient biological act is also a beautiful lesson in humility. Life does not need you to be awake at all times in order to persist. It needs your cooperation. Cooperation through timely withdrawal, through allowing deeper layers to work, through trusting an intelligence refined over millions of years of evolution. In The Wisdom of Insecurity, Alan Watts wrote, "The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless." Sleep keeps life from becoming rigid. It renews, it softens, it allows movement to continue without exhausting the system. If you carry the fear that sleep is a waste of time, try seeing it differently. Sleep is an investment in rhythm. Without rhythm, there is no melody. Without night, day becomes harsh. And without sleep, our fragile consciousness begins to crack. As night deepens, this synchronization becomes clearer. Outside Earth continues to turn. The atmosphere holds warmth. The magnetic field shields. Inside the brain organizes. The body restores. These two movements, outer and inner, proceed together. You are not the central controller. You are a participating part. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Philosophical Investigations, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Sleep opens a world that does not require language. There, the limits of words no longer bind. Their healing happens without explanation. And if sleep has any meaning, it may be very simple to return life to its proper rhythm. Not faster, not slower, just enough to continue." So if right now you feel yourself drifting beyond the edge of wakefulness, take it as a good sign. There is no need to hold on, no need to follow to the end. The phase shift has begun. The universe does not need you awake to keep moving. The body does not need your command to restore itself. You may let the voice blur, let the words dissolve, let the breath lead. Sleep is not leaving this journey. Sleep is traveling with it in the oldest way, synchronized, silent, and safe enough for everything else to quietly find its place. When sleep is seen as a harmonizing and natural phase shift of life, the flow of the story can slow once more and then slow again, even deeper. At this rhythm, there is no longer any need for cosmic imagery, no need for data, no need for discovery. What remains is a very small gesture, yet a deeply human one, setting the questions down. Human beings often carry questions the way they carry luggage. Some questions we open and close. Some we set down only to pick up again. And some questions are so heavy that we no longer notice how tired our shoulders have become. We grow used to believing that if we do not understand everything, we are not yet allowed to rest. That rest must come only at the end, after everything is clear, after every doubt has been resolved. And it is precisely this belief that makes the night feel long. But the universe does not operate this way. It does not wait for our answers in order to continue expanding. It does not pause so that we can keep up. It does not require us to grasp its meaning in full. Stars are born and fade without witnesses. Time flows without explanation. The universe does not demand answers. Only human beings place that pressure upon themselves. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." This sentence is not a surrender of thought, but a doorway into quiet. There are things that lie beyond language, and when we stop forcing names upon them, a healing stillness appears. That stillness is not emptiness. It is a place where questions are allowed to rest. If you are listening now, it is very likely that you have been carrying questions for a long time. Questions about direction, about choices, about yourself, about whether you are living correctly. By day, they line up to be solved. By night, they are still there, only more tired. And perhaps for the first time after a long day, you can try something different, not solving them. Not because they are unimportant, but because they do not need answers right now. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The pressure to understand everything is also an estimate, the estimate that if we set our questions down, everything will collapse. But the truth is this: the universe continues while we sleep. The body functions when we are not paying attention. Life does not require our constant understanding in order to unfold. Setting questions down is not the abandonment of intelligence. It is an act of trust. Trust that deeper processes are at work. Trust that not everything needs to be illuminated at once. Like a room that needs only enough light to be safe, not bright enough to impress. Soren Kierkegaard once wrote in The Sickness unto Death, "Life can be lived only forwards, but it can be understood backwards." If understanding comes only in hindsight, then forcing ourselves to understand in the middle of the night is an unnecessary burden. Night is not for understanding. Night is for being carried by breath, carried by honest fatigue, carried by the knowledge that morning will come and the questions will still be there. You do not need to hold them through the dark. There is a very simple image for this gesture, like placing a heavy object on the floor, not throwing it away, not denying it, simply setting it down. Shoulders soften, hands empty, and in that brief moment, the body understands that it is safe. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard once wrote in The Poetics of Reverie, "Reverie is a state of pure relaxation. Reverie is not avoidance. It is a form of rest for consciousness, where questions are neither chased away nor tightly held. They drift like leaves on water without needing a shore. Only human beings create the obligation to understand everything. But that obligation does not come from the universe. It comes from the fear that without understanding, we will lose control. And perhaps what needs healing is not the lack of answers, but the fear of losing control, because control in the end is a fragile illusion. Albert Camus once wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, "The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. Yet the world's silence is not always unreasonable. Sometimes it is simply inviting us to be silent as well, not to abandon meaning, but to let meaning rest. If you allow yourself not to understand everything tonight, another feeling may quietly appear, not emptiness, but lightness. Lightness from no longer carrying everything on your shoulders. Lightness from no longer following each thought to its end. Lightness from realizing that existence is not a problem that must be solved before sleep is permitted." Martin Heidegger once wrote, "In being and time, only because Dasein is anxious in the very depths of its being, does it become possible for it to be authentic. But even this deep anxiety needs pauses, not to disappear, but not to occupy all space." And sleep is one of the gentlest pauses there is. When you set questions down, you do not lose them. You simply give them time. And time, as we have seen, is not absolute. It can slow. It can feel lighter when it is no longer stretched by constant attention. So in this breath, you may try something very small. Stop following the words. Do not try to remember what was just said. Do not strain to grasp a deeper meaning. Simply feel the body here supported by the bed, by the soft darkness, by a night that demands nothing. The universe does not demand answers. It does not grade your understanding. It does not keep track of whether you listen to the end. It simply continues. And within that continuing, you are allowed to pause. When questions are set down, an inner space opens, not to be filled with answers, but to rest. And if there is a very gentle truth at the end of this flow, it may be this: you do not need to understand everything in order to rest. You only need to allow yourself to set things down very lightly, as if placing a heavy object to the side, and let sleep arrive not as a reward, but as a natural right of life itself. When the questions have been set down very gently, when the need to understand, to follow, to hold on has dissolved for long enough, this current can begin to lower itself. Not like a door closing, but like a lamp being slowly dimmed. There is no period, no summary, only a very gradual movement, allowing the universe to continue in your place. The voice does not need to go any farther. It can thin out like the last waves touching the shore and then retreating. Sentences do not need to be complete. Ideas do not need to be rounded. Everything has already done its work, not to be remembered, but to bring you to a place where letting go is possible. Here, there is no task to stay until the end, no requirement to listen all the way through, no expectation waiting for you to respond. If you feel yourself drifting, that is not losing the way. That is the correct orbit. Journeys meant for sleep do not end with conclusions, but with permission. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations Nowhere You Can Go, is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. That quiet is not a reward for deep understanding. It comes from stopping the effort to understand. And in this moment, you are allowed to do that. The universe does not need you awake in order to continue operating. The stars do not wait for attention. Time does not require awareness. Ancient cycles turning expanding, shifting phase continue steadily whether you are awake or asleep. And so you are not abandoning any responsibility when you close your eyes. You are simply handing over the watch. There are stories that do not need an ending to be complete. They are finished when the listener falls asleep partway through. Not from disrespect, but from having arrived at the right place. Like a night train that does not announce the final station you get off when the body feels safe enough to stop. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Philosophical Investigations, "Explanations come to an end somewhere, and where they end, silence begins its work. Silence does not argue, it does not prove, it does not ask. It is simply there wide enough for you to set down whatever you are still holding. If you are still listening, the voice may become a little smaller. If you are no longer listening, that is entirely fine. There is no missing out here. There is nothing that needs to be remembered or carried forward. Every piece has either found its place or has been allowed to fall away." In The Poetics of Space, Gaston Bachelard wrote, "Immensity is within ourselves. That immensity does not need to be explored further. It is opened enough for you to be still. And when you are still, the body knows exactly what to do next. Let the video grow smaller. not turning off but thinning out, like a voice lowering until it blends into the night, like the moment when you can no longer tell what is words and what is your own breath. There is no need to keep that boundary anymore. Alan Watts once reminded us in The Wisdom of Insecurity, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. So do not try to hold this moment. Do not try to preserve the feeling of calm. Let it move on as everything else moves on. Life does not freeze. It flows softly, and sleep is one of its gentlest movements. If a thought still lingers, let it pass without following it. If a question stands at the threshold, let it remain there, neither closing the door nor opening it further. Night does not require decisions. It only needs to be dark enough for deeper processes to work. Martin Heidegger once wrote, "In being and time, let beings be. Let breath be breath. Let tiredness be tiredness. Let letting go be letting go. Nothing more." And if there is one final thing very light, it may be this permission: you do not need to carry the universe into sleep. You do not need to guard meaning. You do not need to complete the journey. The universe will continue for you. The voice may dissolve. The video may fade. There is no closing signal, no sound that seals the end, only a pause warm enough for sleep to arrive on its own, uncalled, unhurried, unawaited. And when sleep comes, it does not come as a reward. It comes as the most natural return, like something being set down and no longer needing to be picked up, like night receiving you very gently so that everything else out there and within can continue in its own rhythm. Nothing more needs to be said. No conclusion is required, only dimming and then quiet.